Cora. Ooh, how long ago? 2 years, 3? 3 years ago, I do private duty caregiving. And she called me from my name was on a list to help with her mom, who's also from Amsterdam, Holland. And they moved to Warsaw. So I stayed with her mother so they could do fun things with their grandchildren. And I'm thinking, what am I going to have in common with this woman? I don't know anything about Holland. So I thought, well, everybody knows their national anthem, so I brought my iPad and I played the Dutch national anthem, and she perked right up and started to sing in Dutch and taught me some Dutch. Yes, and she tried to teach me to crochet, but I got an F. I got an F. So, and she has passed away since. Oh, I have to tell you a funny story. She would not eat unless I ate with her, and that is very common. And I'm thinking, well, I just grabbed something really quick, so I grabbed crackers and sardines for my lunch. And little did I know they eat fish a lot in Holland, and so she goes, "Oh, fish?" Thinking it's just sardines, no. So anyway, to Cora. Cora was born in Holland, and she came to America when she was 4 years old. Footprints from home is how she tells her story of how her parents, both of them, survived the Nazi occupation of Holland. Her story is a testimony of God's miraculous intervention in the lives of all. And isn't it he's a miraculous invention in all our lives, really. Who summoned their courage to safeguard human dignity. If you did not get one of these about her, there's more back by the sign-up table. Please grab one. Her husband Steve also speaks. He's on the back. And he's also right there. Yay. And because they're, book them in your events and let them come speak. She's been a Christian college professor for over 50 years. But doesn't she look 29? She's a writer, a Christian motivational speaker. She's Steve's wife, she's Jason's mom, and she has 2 beautiful granddaughters, Tegan and Shiloh. Oma, which is Dutch for grandma. By using stories and skits and visuals, her message seeks to encourage men and women to live life abundantly. She's worn many hats during her professional career. And in addition to teaching, she's the director of dramatic arts in various churches. With her husband Steve, she wrote the classic children's curriculum. It's called Skituations. And it is a all these drama skits that they can put on in the churches. And it's used throughout the world. I don't know if you know who you have here. It's like her skits, plays, and storytelling illustrations are available. This is why I asked you to make sure you get this. So you can get the ChristianSkitSource.com. You've got all her contact information here that you need. If you'd love for her to come speak at your church or any organization, get a hold of her. So without further ado, I would love for you guys to put your hands together and welcome my friend Cora.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to dim the lights so we can see the screen a little bit. It's not technical difficulty.
Ik ben zeer aangenaam om jullie allemaal te ontmoeten. I am very happy to meet you. That's Dutch. And I speak fluent Dutch. It was my first language. And the only language in which my mother could become angry. Because if she switched languages on me, I knew this was serious. So I love talking about my heritage, but I love being an American. It is the greatest honor So I'm going to take you back in time and tell you our story. But before I do that, we're going to talk a little bit about Holland and just understand what it is and where it is. It's a tiny country in Western Europe, just across the channel from England. People actually go to England for lunch. Imagine. I can't. They go to France for shopping. It's right in the middle of everything. It's about the size of Maryland. That's pretty small. It has 12 provinces, and the most common two are North and South Holland. So I'm going to show you what the costumes look like. The costumes, you could probably seen them. They have a little flowered bodice, but they change by province. That's how they identify who's from which province. So that's pretty clever. Some people put flowers on them, others wouldn't dream of putting flowers on them. And then there's a little apron. But first, there's a red, white, and blue skirt. That's actually universal. So the red, white, and blue skirt goes on. And I'm kind of cheating here because this is, something I can wear over my outfit. So we have the red, white, blue, which is the colors of the Dutch flag. And then there's a little apron. You all see this? Yeah, you'll see it in just a minute. The apron goes on. And the aprons also change, but those kind of change by personality. So the costume is provincial. It changes by province. The hats signify whether or not the girl is married. I didn't know that. I hope I'm wearing the right hat. Steve and I are in our 50th year of marriage, and it's a tremendous honor to even know this man, much less have lived with him for the last 50 years. And then, I think if you're married, the little tips turn up, and if you're not, they stick straight out. Maybe to catch someone, I don't know. And these are familiar to everybody, right? The infamous wooden shoe. Well, I'm cheating because this is the infamous wooden shoe slipper. Because there is nothing more uncomfortable than wooden shoes. And the reason for the wooden shoes is because in Holland, it's called the Netherlands, below sea level. And the Dutch are the most bullheaded of the Germanic tribes because they simply walked up to the North Sea and said, back off, to an ocean. It's amazing. And they created some of the dike works that are actually one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. But the Dutch farmlands are squishy. They're very moist, and that's why tulips grow, everything grows. But when you walk, it's just crazy. And so you put these on, and then there's some straw. You put straw in the shoe. And this is still done all over in the farmlands. You put straw in the shoe, and because it soaks up the water during the course of the day. And then you wear the thickest socks you can find. And eventually, ta-da, you have the Dutch outfit. And then the great thing about these wooden shoes is that if they were leather, they would deteriorate with the constant moisture. And if they were fabric, of course, that's a waste of time. It soaks right through. So they just put these shoes on the porch and let them dry overnight, and in the morning do it all over again. And shoes will last for years and years and years. They're always carved out of one solid piece of some kind of wood, most often pine, because it's very lightweight. So, now you've seen the Dutch outfit. And like I said, it changes by provinces. But also, you need to learn the Dutch language. Are you ready? Okay. The Dutch children are taught their language phonetically. So, I have here a Dutch game that my mother taught me, how to recognize and read Dutch. I could speak Dutch fluently, and the children have a little puzzle that they put together, and they say the words, and what they do is they recognize the sounds of their language, so that when they see it in print, they know what the sound is. So it's a phonetic alphabet. And I'm going to say a few words, and you're going to repeat. Are you ready? Sharpen up that tongue. Because the Dutch language is Germanic by root, and that's why Dutch and German can often sound very similar. Like I can say, Guten Morgen, Dames en Heren, which is German. And in Dutch, I can say, Goedemorgen, dames en heren, and it's almost the same thing. So, but it has a hard G, kind of a, so it's like you're getting ready to spit, okay? And you can't stand too close to a Dutchman if he's really fired up, because it's gonna be a mess, okay? So here we go, ready? Here we go. Aap. Noot.
Noot.
Mies.
Mies.
Wim.
Wim.
Zus.
Zus.
Jet.
Jet.
Teun.
Teun.
That's the guy's name. Vuur.
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 Gijs.
Gijs.
Lam.
Lam.
Kees.
Kees.
Bok.
Bok.
Wede.
Wede.
Doos.
Doos.
Hok.
Hok.
Duif.
Duif.
Schapen.
Schapen.
That is the big $10 word. Schapen.
Schapen.
That's an SCH, schapen. Yeah, and you roll the R's. They're kind of like the Spanish R's. That kind of thing. Okay, that's all the sounds of the Dutch language. Now that you speak Dutch, you're going to learn a Dutch song. Because the Dutch are a singing population. They sing all the time about everything. You've seen the polkas and the organs and the dancing and these are called klompen, the shoes. This song is translated, it says, Lang zal ze leven. Can you say that with me? Lang zal ze leven. That's long may you live. Long may you live. So you say that 3 times. Lang zal ze leven, lang zal ze leven, lang zal ze leven. It's a song sung at anniversary parties, graduations, retirement parties, but it's particularly used in birthday parties. So you sing it 3 times. In the Gloria, that means in glory. May it be glorious for you in this phase of your life. But it also may it be glorious for you in the hereafter. May you live in glory both here and later in your life. So, the way it goes is, Lang zal ze leven. Now you sing it with me. Lang zal ze leven. One more time. Lang zal ze leven in the gloria. In the gloria. Now you go, hey! And everybody has to go, hey! With your arms. Every arm up. Hey, ready? 1, 2, 3. Hey! Good! In the gloria. Now this is the cheer. And you go, heap, heap, heap. Ho! Got it? And you do that 3 times. So it's heap, 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 ho! Now do it with me. Heap, 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 ho! Heap, 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 ho! Heap, 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 ho! These people are Dutch.
They are good.
They really are. Don't you feel like you want to go out and just buy wooden shoes now? Okay, here comes the song. Get ready. With the organ. Long songs of labor, long songs of labor in the Gloria, in the Gloria, the Gloria. Hey! Very good, very good. Now we're going to go, hee 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 hee, ho! Hee 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 hee, ho! Hee 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 hee, ho! Very good, very good. Now that you know about the Dutch costume and you speak Dutch, and you can sing a song in Dutch, now we're going to give you a brief flyover, a 4-minute flyover of Holland. It's called Holland, the Netherlands, but most of the people live in North and South Holland.
Cheese, beer, windmills, bicycles, canals, and culture. Can you guess which country I'm about to talk about? Ah, the Netherlands. Today, I'm delighted to share some fun and interesting facts about the Netherlands. Bicycles rule. The Netherlands is known as a cyclist paradise. It boasts an extensive network of bike paths, and approximately 27% of all trips in the country are made by bicycle. Tulip mania. The Netherlands is renowned for its tulips. However, did you know that during the 17th century, tulip bulbs were so highly valued that they sparked an economic frenzy known as tulip mania? At the peak of the craze, a single tulip bulb could cost as much as a grand house. Wow. Dutch cheese delights. The Netherlands is a cheese lover's dream. Gouda and Edam are the most famous varieties. But the country boasts over 1,000 different types of Dutch cheese. Be sure to try cheese tasting or visit the traditional cheese markets in cities like Alkmaar or Gouda. Windmills galore. Windmills are an iconic symbol of the Netherlands. Although their numbers have significantly reduced over time, you can still find over 1,000 windmills scattered throughout the country. Visit the Kinderdijk or Zaanse Schans to see picturesque windmills in action. The Delta Works. The Netherlands is known for its innovative engineering solutions to combat the threat of flooding. The Delta Works, a massive system of dams, storm surge barriers, and dikes, protects the low-lying country from the North Sea. It's a marvel of Dutch engineering and even considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. Dutch pancakes. Indulge in some delicious Dutch pancakes, known as pannenkoeken. These pancakes are larger and thinner than the American variety and can be enjoyed with both sweet and savory toppings. Be sure to try the traditional stroopwafel, a delightful treat made of 2 thin waffles filled with caramel syrup. Famous artists. The Netherlands has produced some of the world's most renowned artists. Masters like Rembrandt van Rijn, Johannes Vermeer, and Vincent van Gogh hail from the Dutch artistic tradition. You can explore their works in museums such as the Rijksmuseum and the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. The Dutch East India Company. In the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company was the first multinational corporation. It played a significant role in global trade, establishing colonies and trade routes across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The Dutch royal family. The Netherlands is a constitutional monarchy with a rich royal history. The House of Orange-Nassau has been the ruling dynasty since the establishment of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in 1815. King Willem-Alexander is the current monarch. Dutch festivals. The Netherlands love to celebrate, and there are numerous unique festivals throughout the year. King's Day or Koningsdag.
Not going to disturb other people's dignity and other people's sanctuary. The rule is, be who you are, let that be you, but don't you hurt anyone. If you do that, you're out. The Dutch will summon all the fury they had when they pushed back the sea if you try to challenge their sanctuary or their dignity. Now, why do all cultures have this in common? I think it's because we were made in the image of God. And I'll tell you why. God provides both sanctuary and dignity. On the cross, Jesus paid the sin price for us all, and he created dignity in us. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. In his resurrection, Jesus provides sanctuary. He proves to us that we have the gift of eternal life in the presence of God. What a sanctuary. I go to prepare a place for you. If it were not so, I would not have said it. The 10 Commandments are interesting. The first 4 tell you to honor God as your sanctuary. The next 6 tell you to honor yourself and people and how you treat them. They're about dignity. The great commandment, listen to what it really says. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. God is your sanctuary. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's all about dignity. Protect your own and your neighbor. So let's remain committed to helping others find sanctuary and bestow dignity in every word we speak and every action we take. May we ever be mindful what happens to the world when it is devastated by war and fueled by hatred. Hatred is a choice. It's a state of mind. God tells us to take every thought captive because a thought becomes an action becomes a habit becomes a lifestyle, and a lifestyle becomes a destiny. When people are robbed of sanctuary and dignity, civilization breaks. And to understand how civilization breaks, I'm going to tell you the story of both my parents and how they found sanctuary in America and how their dignity was restored after the Nazi regime tried to destroy both. So we're going to take a brief journey through the entire 20th century in Holland, through the lives of both my parents. Their names are Ari, blue tablecloth, and Sophie, red, one of her favorite colors. My dad, my mom. Theirs is a story of unwavering faith, the power of prayer, and the timeless truth that God is on the side of those who are on his side. My story begins with their story. My father was born in 1921, right after World War I. And the cheer, the positivity was amazing because there were no more bombs falling from the sky. It was happy days.
Happy days are here again, the skies are clear again. Let us sing the song of cheer again. Happy days are here again.
It was a celebration in the streets for years and years. It was a time of positivity, a time of looking out to the future. And my 5-year-old dad was raised in the faith. His mother was a prayer warrior and a saint of a Christian woman. Prayed for her family day and night, and always invited people over. She had 9 brothers and sisters. And plus their siblings and their in-laws and outlaws and their children. They'd all come over and they would sit in a fellowship circle. Now in Holland, The fellowship circle fills the room. You don't sit in clusters like y'all are seated, because you might leave somebody out. You sit in this big, huge pile of people. And then when you enter the room, you have to say hello to every single person in the room. Hello. Hello, so nice to see you. The entire circle. Everybody. Hello. Hello, so nice to see you. Hello. Hello. And then when you leave, nice to see you too. When you leave, you have to go backwards. Goodbye. Goodbye. Really, goodbye. I will miss you terribly. Goodbye. Goodbye. It was lovely to see you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Everybody, hello. Goodbye. And goodbye, darling. My mother made me do this all the time growing up. And I just hated it because as a child, you know what they do to you? Oh, you're so cute! And I would come up to people and go like this. Like, please don't touch me. Or they would say, my, aren't we getting big? And she'd say, give a hand. And give a hand is shake hands. And I go, all right. And if you got fussy about it, and you struck up too much of a conversation with these people, they would put you in the middle of the circle to find out what it is you were talking about. So the fellowship was, anyway, my grandmother would have these fellowship circles at the end of Sunday morning. We go to church all the time. We go Sunday morning, Sunday night, go Wednesday night. And then she would have this habit of reading scripture at the table and then stop reading at a certain point. And every Bible had to be open and you had to pick up if she looked at you. This woman loved God so much. She held that family together with her prayers and her faithfulness. But my father, a pretty sharp little man for 5 years old, he would stand, that's the first time I've stood on this thing, so I'm braced. He would stand up on a step stool so that he was taller. And he would grab his Bible, 5, and repeat the sermon. It was amazing, a mind like a steel trap. He would repeat the sermon. And of course, everybody sitting in the circle would be very profoundly impressed with his 5-year-old rendition of what it is we just heard. So it was a wonderful, tight-knit family, brothers and sisters everywhere. And the 3 of them were happy. My grandmother, my grandfather Leonard, her name is Cornelia, and I am named for her. I am so grateful to my parents that they left off the Nelia, and they just call me Cora. Cornelia, Leonard, and little Harry, 5-year-old preacher. But my grandfather was a little nervous about the onslaught of World War I. He had served in World War I. And he said it won't be long now before the Germans rise again. And he was right. He had a dream. He had a dream, and he wanted to take his family to America. So he made arrangements to go and start a new life. And one day, my father walked down to the pier and said goodbye to him. And he was gone. And this left just my little father and his mother, and he said, I will send for you. But my dad was devastated. He lost his father. What was he going to do? And they waited. And they waited. And my father vowed that he would go and find his father. And they waited. And he did not come back. My grandmother, when she stood on that dock, she told me, I saw him go, and all she could do was pray, Lord, keep your eye on him. My mother, however, had quite a different birth. 1927 she was born, 6 years younger than my father. In the middle of the roaring 20s, and our family is convinced that she made the 20s roar. What a spitfire of a little woman. She only stood 5'2". I think I get my stunning height from her. She was the little princess of the family. So premature. Her mother had 9 miscarriages prior, so they took Mom a little early. She was the apple of everyone's eye. They gave her 3 first names, Johanna Sophia Rosalina. And they thought, that's way too many words for this small little package. So they called her Sophia, and then shortened the whole thing to Fee, which worked fine. Ari and Fee is how they were known all their lives. My grandfather was an official in the Dutch soccer team. And so the entire Dutch soccer team, the national Dutch soccer team, about 42 men, were in my grandmother and grandfather's house when my grandmother was upstairs in labor. And they lined the whole stairway going up to the floor where she was. And they sang the Dutch fight song to help her through labor. And this is what it sounds like.
Op de wand, kameraden, op de wand, voor Feyenoord. Geen woorden maar daden, leven Feyenoord.
Can you just imagine? My grandmother stood a whopping 4'11". And here were all these huge men just outside the door, jingling their keys, singing Feyenoord fight songs, one after the other. And my mother was born into the world. I'm sorry, Steve, I skipped the cafe. Can you go back to the cafe? My parents were cafe owners, my grandparents. There's my grandmother, her name is Alida, and my grandfather, Amtol. So I am named for both grandmas. Cora, Alida, Van Geluth was the last name. Translated of the faith. So, my mother, I knew I would get confused on the sides of the table. She was kind of raised in a cafe, and she was raised to be a very dignified little lady. Because after all, lots of people came to the cafe, there were football players everywhere. They had lots of notoriety, and they lived very high in society. Mom had a governess, and she had her father's mother, her grandmother, that she affectionately called Opu. Opu was like great-grandma. And they would go, look at her, little princess, isn't she cute? And they would go on carriage rides, the two of them, Opu and my mom. Opu would rent the carriage and the driver and the white horse, and then she would say to my mother, wave. Wave hello to everybody. Now remember, Holland has a constitutional monarchy, so this was a queenly thing to do. So she would say, wave. Wave, say hello. And then she said, smile, because your smile and your wave might be the only kind thing that happens to them all day or all week. Wave. And so the Dutch are very courteous. As they're riding their bikes, they're constantly waving, hello, hello. And then the greeting thing, don't get me started on the greeting page. So Mom was raised to be a very proper little lady. Now, when she was in elementary school, she was 9 years old, her teacher started talking about America, a place that had oranges all year long. Oranges were my mom's favorite. In her 9-year-old brain, she had already left Holland for the oranges. Gotta have them. And I think we always had a bowl of oranges on the table. Horse rides, buggies. She had a dream of going to California. Life was grand. She was the official mascot of the Dutch soccer team. Of course, they were there heralding her birth. She mastered all kinds of delicate arts. She became quite a crochet wizard. She could crochet anything. She was great with knitting. What happened to my sound? Oh, she was great with knitting, I promise you. There we go. Great in crocheting, great with knitting, and she did it until her, mid-80s, also 90s. In the senior home where she lived till she came to live with us, she did little classes, and it was called Crochet with Faye. She became known as Faye in this country, but it was Crochet with Faye. She also studied becoming a milliner, and she would crochet hats and then decorate them and make the artificial flowers. Very crafty lady. And she stayed that way. She was an arts and crafts therapist for retirement communities. And then she was so cute. When she was 85, she'd say, I have to go help the old people. I'd say, Mom, newsflash, you are an old person. Anyway, life was grand. On the other hand, my father's life did not build his dignity. My father's dignity was crushed in the years after his father left. They waited and waited and waited, but he did not return. So out of desperation, my grandmother remarried. But she married a man who hated my father because my father was the absolute mirror image of his own father. They had the very same face. So my stepfather set his cap against my father to make his life miserable in hopes that my grandmother would just send him away. But she didn't. He would insist on beating him. My grandmother would beg him, let me beat him. And then they would go into another room, and she would hit her hand like this. And he would stand beside, trying not to laugh. Just scream. And he'd go, ow! So that my stepfather would be satisfied that he'd received a good beating. The two of them were tight. She would never lay a hand on this boy, but she did teach him how to feign being beaten to death. He was good at overdoing his reaction to just about everything. Finally, it got so bad that 9-year-old Ali, she couldn't have him in the house anymore because the stepfather was just too brutal. So she sent her 9-year-old son to go live with his grandparents, his father's parents, in Dirksland. So she gave him a suitcase, put a little ticket in his pocket for the ferry because Dirksland is an island province off to the side of Holland. And it's basically a farm community. And my grandparents on my father's side taught my dad how to farm. Turned him into a little farmer. But at least he was safe. And when my grandma put him on the train, all she could do was pray. And so every summer, for the longest time, he went there. This is D'Excellent. Wonderful farm community. We passed so many beautiful farms on our way here. Gorgeous, gorgeous farms. And the beautiful trees that are blooming everywhere. It was like a trip through heaven. Artie hoped he would find his father there. That was his goal. He thought, well, maybe my dad went back to his own people. And so the Van Geloof clan welcomed him. Now the word Van Geloof, excuse me, I have to suck on this because I've had a terrific cold. The Van Geloof name means of the faith. And they were famous for creating a white endive, which is quite a delicacy. So he traveled back and forth between mom and the grandparents, dodging his stepfather's alcoholic rages. And then came the Depression. The Depression was a horrific time in Europe, but especially in the cities. And so my stepfather knew that money was so tight, there were bread lines everywhere, and he thought, wait, I have this 12-year-old boy that I don't know what to do with. So he sold my father to Czechoslovakia as an indentured servant and had him make shoes. Now, this was a sweatshop. In your worst nightmares, this 12-year-old boy was relegated there for years. And he tells us stories, and he says, well, the good side of it is I met a lot of other boys from all over Europe who had also been sold into indentured servitude, and the money went back to the stepfather, or back to the parents. The child didn't actually get any. But he said the upside of that was he learned how to speak 7 languages. Why not? There were kids from all over the world there. And then because of a near-death accident while making the shoes, he was sent back home. Well, it wouldn't do after he left from that child sweatshop. It wouldn't do to have him back in the home. The stepfather was too violent. And so my father was sent away again to his uncles. Now remember, my grandmother had 9 brothers and sisters. That's a passel of people. And there's a whole lot of learning that these people have done in their lives. And so he learned a lot of stuff. He learned carpentry. He learned cement work. He learned furniture building. He learned how to restore anything that was broken. He learned how to plane water-damaged furniture. He became quite the furniture wizard and quite the techno wizard. Good at just about everything. If it was broken, Jaime could fix it. He would fix old bicycles and sell them, always bringing money back to his mother. He didn't live there. It wasn't safe. But he would bring money to her and steal in by night and hand her the money and then steal away. His tie with his mother was phenomenal. Actually, her faith was his compass. His mother was committed to finding sanctuary. And she had found it in her siblings. The depression for my mother, she had her own private depression. My mother had a great depression that wasn't just economic. My mother's family, remember, owned a pub, and the 3 of them were quite wealthy and quite well off. But the depression shut the doors on the pub. And suddenly the party was over. There was no more money for sausages and beer. No reason to dance, no reason to sing. Unemployment and poverty were rampant. And my mother's beloved Opu that took her on carriage rides passed away. Human dignity was hanging by a thread during the Depression. My mother's father lost his mother, lost his business, and he lost his integrity. And he ran off with a wealthy woman who owned a restaurant. And he was gone. In a heartbeat, there was 2 women alone facing the Depression. At least he would have plenty to eat. He left my mother and her mother to fend for themselves. They were alone. They lost their dignity and they lost their sanctuary with the exit of my grandfather. My mother never got over that. In her early years, she kept trying to understand what had she done. Why couldn't he stay? She was so angry with him, so sad for her mother. And her last words on the earth, when she was 95 and she lay dying, she reached out her hand and she said, "Papa, come get me." It was with her all of her life. I think we have no idea how valuable we are as parents to our children. We can't even fathom. The Depression was devastating. But the war was worse. The Dutch can hold back the sea, but they couldn't hold back the Nazis. Life changed in the Netherlands on May 10, 1940. My mother's heart was broken, and my father abandoned. My grandfather abandoned her. Her world was broken by World War II. Many times she would gather us together and say, "Guard your freedom, it's fragile. It can change overnight." Because for her it did. At 13 years old, the war began. She was living in a modest 4-room apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brick building in downtown Rotterdam, and they struggled to make ends meet. The night before the Nazi invasion, my mother was dancing on a bridge, on the Maas Bridge. You know, the Maas River comes into Rotterdam and creates that harbor. And she was dancing on the bridge with friends. They had just gone to a concert. Unbeknownst to her, the entire bridge was filled with Nazi soldiers underneath. They had come in their U-boats underwater. And they were everywhere. She went home, went to bed. The next morning, the Germans invaded. And they filled the streets. Devastated. 4 days they fought hard to fight against the Germans. And it was to no avail. On the 14th of May, the Germans bombed the interior heart of Rotterdam, Holland. And there's a statue in the town square, and it's called the Verwoeste Staat. And the Verwoeste Staat means the destroyed city. And next came the hunger winter of 1944. There was no food, no shelter, no fresh water, and the Dutch became sanctuary for each other. There was nothing else they could do. The Dutch resistance fighters slept on the floor of my mother's and my grandmother's apartment every night. The Dutch resistance fighters did this. If the Nazis knew they were hiding there, they would have shot both of them. They were committed to sanctuary and dignity for the Dutch resistance fighters. My mother knit warm gloves, caps, blankets for the men because she figured if you have a warm head, warm hands, and blankets, you have a chance in this life. So she would knit like fury all day and then cover them at night. But what were they going to feed them? Don't know. They didn't have anything themselves. So she got a coat hanger. And she covered the coat hanger with a stocking and created a net. And then in the night, now remember this is Nazi-infested streets. In the night, she would put her long auburn hair up in a cap, disguise herself like a boy, and lay on her belly and scoop the canals for fish. And put them in a bucket, and then take the fish. This is like at 2 a.m, middle of the night. And then her mother would make a paste out of the fish, a protein paste. And that is how they made a soup to feed these boys. And this is how they made it through the war, fishing in the river. They survived so many impossible situations, from dancing on an enemy-infested bridge to Nazi fishing in a canal, dodging their evil eye. And it's quite a far cry from buggy rides in a purple carriage. My mother's life is a testimony of timeless truth that God is on the side of those who are on his side. Now I'm going to back up and tell you a story about what happened to my father when he was 17. My father couldn't go back home. The depression was violently hard. So he joined the Merchant Marines when he was 17. And he started sailing around the Americas looking for his own father. He said, he's got to be out there somewhere. So he told his mother, my father is in me. I can find him. Not knowing if she would ever see her beloved son again, my grandmother stood on the dock in the exact same spot where she waved goodbye to her own husband 12 years earlier and said goodbye and prayed the prayer, Lord, keep your eye on him. And he was gone. From the ship, he shouted, God is on my side. And my grandmother shouted back, stay on his side. For 2 years, he sailed around the colonies. And finally, he came to the Dutch seaman's house. Here's what it looks like. It's like a YMCA. But it didn't serve alcohol, and it had bed and showers for Dutch boys. Because the Dutch were all over the seacoast. They were world explorers. So he was sitting there drinking his hot chocolate, praying, Lord, show me where my father is. And a perfect stranger walked up to him and called him by his father's name. Remember I told you there was incredible resemblance between the two of them. he called him Leonard. And he said, my name's not Leonard, my name is Ivy. Leonard's my father. And the man said, well, then come with me. And he walked him right to his father's house. Isn't that an incredible thing? What an answer to prayer. The resemblance between the two, just look at it. That's Leonard, that's my dad. What a miracle. God is present in the most horrific of circumstances. And so he came back to the ship to get his stuff because he was going to go live with his dad now. But when he came back to the ship, they lifted the ramp and said, you can't go back. War has broken out in Europe. We have to go home. And his father stood at the dock and waved. And Ali stood at the top and waved. After all that searching, he came back and he went back to the aunts and uncles. It's the only thing he could do. And they were starving because in 1944, the Germans had entered Europe into Holland. They wanted the Dutch seaport. They wanted Rotterdam. And they wanted all the agriculture and technology of the Dutch. And they blocked off the streets going into Rotterdam so that no food and no water could enter. They were starving and killing the people. They didn't want to bomb any more buildings. That's a waste of time. Let's just knock off the people. So my father lived in the shadows in the aunts and uncles' homes, and then he saw a sign. He saw a sign in advertising for Dutch boys wanted to do farm work. And he thought, farm work? And then the ad said, you get a basket of food at the end of every day to take home to your family. And he thought, perfect, I can take that home to my mother. Meanwhile, she had had 3 more children by this wicked man. So she had mouths to feed. She was in a pickle. So he thought, I'm going. And he got on the truck, the German truck, thinking it's just a day's farm work. I'm going to bring home a box of vegetables. See ya. And then, when he got there, he discovered there was no farm. There was no work. He had been shanghaied to work in the death camps as a slave laborer. He told them, wait, after a couple of months of this, he almost went insane at what he saw. He couldn't handle that. He said, I'm a great mechanic. I can fix anything. So they put him in the motor pool to work on German jeeps and tanks. And he and his buddies, there were other people Shanghai. They went in Shanghai to load Dutch boys every day. And so he was so good at mechanics that he knew how to sabotage an engine so that it would only work another month. And he sabotaged more German artillery than you could ever imagine. And then finally, he was pretty good at it, they thought, and they transferred him to Lyon, France. Well, when they transferred him to Lyon, France, he thought, aha, a train ride. So he waits for the opportune moment. And when the train comes to a stop, it's dark, he rolls off the train into some tall grass. And he lays there for 3 days, just to be sure nobody could follow the tracks anywhere. He actually dropped off the train, so there were no tracks. He laid there for 3 days, finally put his head up over the tall grass. And he moved slowly toward Lyon. And as he approached civilization, 6 men approached him, and his heart stopped. And he thought, oh no, here it goes again. To Holland. It's 531 miles away. And they said, well, all we have is this old bike. And he said, well, all I have is a pack of cigarettes. I'll swap you the cigarettes for the bike. And sure enough, he rode his bike from Lyon, France to Rotterdam, Holland. It took a while. We didn't have anything, clothes on his back, and it was raining and pouring about halfway through. And then he blew a tire. And he thought, oh, what am I going to do now? Blew the tire, and then what did he do? His mother taught him what to do. You do what? You pray. God is with you. And he said, Lord, I've done my best. Be on my side. Hear me, help. An hour went by, 2 hours went by, pouring rain. He's drenched to the bone. And in the distance, he sees a man approaching on a bike who's wearing a cape, a heavy rain cape. The man approaches my father and says, oh, you got problems with the tire. He says, yeah. He happens to have a tire repair kit with him. He repairs the bike and sends Dad on his way. He says, wait. Takes his cape off, puts it on my dad, and disappears into the night. My dad hadn't seen anybody for days on this route, and he didn't see anybody for days on the way home. But at that moment, a man came with a cape and a tire repair kit. What are the odds? He made it to his mother's house. She was overcome with joy. But as soon as she saw him, embraced him, handed him a sandwich, and stuck him in the coal cellar. Put the trap door down over him, sat in her rocking chair, singing hymns and reading the Bible. Because the Nazis were still combing the streets for young boys. And sure enough, they came to her door. And she never stopped singing. She said, there are no boys here. She was sitting on one, but there were no boys here. So that's how my father made it through the war, and how my mother made it through the war. They learned an incredible lesson at this time. A lesson that we all have a dignity as a child of God. And we all have the promise of finding sanctuary. And those were the footprints his mother left on his heart. And those are the footprints he followed home. My parents met at the birthday party of a mutual friend. They had shared dreams. They both wanted to go to America. But since then, my father's father, Leonard, had passed away. So we didn't have a sponsor. How were we going to get there? My uncle found a sponsor. They were married in 1948. Daddy proposed by shouting at my mother off on a train car. One of those train cars that goes through town with the electric. She got off the bus, off the train, and he yells out the window, "Will you marry me?" And she turned around and said, "Yes, sure," and went on shopping. I was born in 1954, but a chronic asthmatic. I just went in for allergy testing to my asthma doctor. And he said, "Congratulations, you're allergic to Indiana." And I said, "No, I can't. I'm sorry. I'm here forever. I will go out feet first." And she said, "Because my son is here, our son, and our beautiful grandchildren. This is it. This is home." So he taught me how to manage the wonderful pollens in the summer, spring. But that's okay. God made inhalers too. My father, though in Holland, had purchased a pub, part interest in a pub. And my mother said, no, we're going to Holland because Cora has asthma. We have to go to a high, dry climate. And Dad says, well, my father has passed away. What am I going to do? We live here now, and how could we make this work? We get a better doctor for her. Mom said, no, we're going to America. She'd had enough of the party culture. She wasn't going to do this again. So she takes a dish towel, wraps it around her little 5'2" hand, walks up to the front window of the pub, and smashes her fist through it. And my father was shocked. His window's in a million pieces. He says, well, I guess we're going to America. And sure enough, we did. We left soon thereafter. I mean, my father was afraid not to go. In 1954, we came to this country by ship. We crossed the country in 4 days by train, all the way across. And we lived in California, the land of the oranges. My parents became citizens, my parents and I, in 1966. My brother and sister were born in America. And this year, the Vangelow family will spend 70th anniversary of our coming to this country. What a wonderful thing. What a wonderful country. Oh my goodness. It's our great honor to be called Americans. This is my little mother. At a family party just before she went to heaven in 2022, Brenda was her caregiver. I can't say enough things about this woman. I would become emotionally totally out of control. I'm convinced she was an angel from heaven. This little princess in the purple carriage ended her life as a queen, surveying a mountain of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She was a picture of survival, tenacity, a champion for the dignity of others, and a sanctuary for people. God led my father and mother all because God saw them. They were on God's side. My father found his father because a stranger saw the resemblance. That's why he called him by his father's name. May we always look so much like our Heavenly Father that people call us by his name. Christians, no matter what culture you represent, no matter what makeup your family is, your family is a lifelong sanctuary where dignity is nurtured. Your commitment to making home a sanctuary is so beautifully said in your creed as you pledge yourselves to the enduring and greatest institution in the world, the home. Your vision statement celebrates your commitment to building dignity in others when you seek to be dedicated to empowering and enriching the lives of individual, family, and community. And the final line of your home economics prayer points back to the source of your strength. Our hope and trust is yet in thee. In Jesus' name, amen. May the values we sow in the hearts of our families always be the footprints that lead them home. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.